Hello, my name is Serhi.
And I'm Emma, and today we're going to talk about the Velociraptor.
So why is he feathered? The Velociraptor in the movies looks completely different.
Yes, indeed, we're used to seeing dinosaurs without feathers. For a long time, scientists believed that all dinosaurs were covered in scales, like reptiles. However, in recent years, new discoveries indicate that some dinosaurs did have feathers after all.
But about the feathers later, there's something else important. Behind us, is that not a Velociraptor?
In movies, we're used to seeing velociraptors as large, scale-covered predators, hunting in packs and fearlessly attacking much larger animals, tearing their victims' flesh with their signature claws. However, that's not actually the case.
I repeat, behind us is not a Velociraptor, it's a Utahraptor.
And here is the Velociraptor. We will tell you about both these dinosaurs.
The thing is, Michael Crichton, the author of Jurassic Park, chose Deinonychus as his prototype, which was considerably larger than a Velociraptor and at that time was widely believed to hunt in coordinated packs. However, he ultimately decided to keep the name Velociraptor, simply because it sounded better, but even Deinonychus wasn't as massive as depicted in the film.
In 1991, a claw was discovered by various paleontologists in the state of Utah, and later, other remains of a dinosaur were found. This creature was named Utahraptor, meaning robber from Utah or thief from Utah. Then, in 1993, precisely when the film Jurassic Park was released, the dinosaur was officially given the species name Utahraptor austromyces, honoring paleontologists John Ostrom and Chris Mays.
Rumor has it that Spielberg was offered a deal. A Utahraptor would be given a species name in honor of the director if he funded future paleontological research. However, as we can see, the Utahraptor does not bear Spielberg's name, so either it is just a rumor, or they simply did not agree on the price.
What's interesting is that Crichton described in his work, and then Spielberg filmed, a dinosaur whose size is closer to a Utahraptor than a Velociraptor. However, in popular culture, it's the latter that's associated with a quite large predatory dinosaur that hunts in packs.
And now, let's break down each raptor separately. Utahraptor, the largest Dromaeosauridae, was about 6 to 7 meters long, with its tail making up a significant portion. Paleontologists debate its weight, but on average it was around 400 to 500 kilograms, and its famous claw was about 24 centimeters long.
Just like the one Professor Grant shows in Jurassic Park, the Utahraptor lived in the territory of present-day USA about 130 million years ago. In the film, the excavations were also conducted in the territory of the USA.
And finally, we move on to the Velociraptor. Two species are known to have lived in Asia about 70 to 75 million years ago. The more well-known and studied Velociraptor mongoliensis was discovered back in 1924 in Mongolia. Velociraptor means swift thief or robber or bandit. This Dromaeosauridae was about 1.5 to 2 meters long, approximately half a meter tall, and weighed around 15 to 20 kilograms. Its signature claw was about 6 centimeters long.
Here's your scary movie killer, though. Admittedly, it's turkey-sized. You could fantasize about a velociraptor as a household pet. Imagine, you're walking your velociraptor in the park in the morning and you meet people walking their dogs. Do you want your pet to always be healthy, active, and happy? Choose Raptorbite pet food, a fully balanced and nutritious meal for daily energy and overall well-being. Raptorbite, more protein, more strength, more instinct.
It's time for us to revisit feathers. As we've discussed before, we're accustomed to seeing dinosaurs covered in scales just like reptiles. However, the fossilized remains of certain dinosaurs have been discovered with clear feather impressions. But what about our characters? Let's begin with the Velociraptor. None of the Velociraptor skeletons discovered had feather impressions, yet they were found on other Dromaeosauridae specimens. However, in 2007, during a comprehensive examination of a Velociraptor skeleton, paleontologists identified quill knobs on the bones of its forelimbs. These exact same structures are present in modern birds, and it is to these that flight feathers are attached.
However, they are rarely found in flightless birds. You should pay particular attention to this point. The presence of these quill knobs indicates the presence of feathers, but their absence does not necessarily mean feathers were absent, as modern flightless birds all possess feathers, yet they do not have these specific quill knobs. And this means that even if a dinosaur's fossilized remains don't display feather imprints, and if there are no specific quill knobs visible on its limbs, there still remains a distinct possibility that the dinosaur was, in fact, feathered. At the very least, this particular consideration applies to theropods, which were known to be very close relatives of modern birds.
So to summarize, the Velociraptor had quill knobs, suggesting the presence of flight feathers. Most likely it was covered in fine feathers, and on its forelimbs it also possessed flight feathers. However, based on its anthropometric data, it was in fact a flightless creature.
The presence of flight feathers on a flightless dinosaur may suggest flying ancestors, but their descendants lost this ability. Among them was the Velociraptor. However, it's also possible that Velociraptor's ancestors weren't flying either, and their flight feathers served a different purpose.
There's another interesting point related to feathers. Why did dinosaurs even have feathers? Besides helping modern birds fly and being used in courtship displays to attract partners, feathers have another very important function: thermoregulation. Feathers in birds and fur in mammals help retain the heat produced by the body. This is especially important for small creatures, for whom retaining heat is more challenging.
So we come to a very interesting and important conclusion. Feathers on dinosaurs are indirect evidence of their warm-bloodedness. Fur or feathers would only hinder a cold-blooded animal from efficiently obtaining heat from the outside. So the Velociraptor, which, like all theropods, is related to birds, most likely had feathers and was warm-blooded.
However, studies on dinosaur bone development showed that their growth rate was slower than that of modern warm-blooded animals, birds, and mammals. This indicates a relatively slow metabolism. The Velociraptor was an active and fast predator. We will talk about this later. This requires a lot of energy. The creature must be warm-blooded and have a fast metabolism for such tasks.
And that's where the kiwi from New Zealand comes to our aid. This modern, warm-blooded, flightless bird possesses a rather slow metabolism. The kiwi is a nocturnal, active bird, busy searching for various invertebrate prey. This unique bird can better explain to us what warm-blooded dinosaurs might have been like.
And now, let's turn our attention to the Utahraptor. In its fossil remains, no feather impressions were found, nor were the quill knobs to which flight feathers attach ever discovered. However, feathered remains were found in various older Dromaeosauridae relatives, and similarly quill knobs in Velociraptor, which lived later than Utahraptor. So, Utahraptor has older relatives who definitely had feathers, and there are also Dromaeosaurids who had feathers and lived after Utahraptor. And on top of all this, they are very close relatives of birds.
Of course, some people believe that Utahraptor did not have feathers, that it might have descended from a line of featherless dinosaurs, or that it lost them as Utahraptor is quite large and can retain heat more easily. So there is a slight chance that it was a large white crow among Dromaeosauridae. However, our conclusion is this: Utahraptor was also warm-blooded and feathered, just like Velociraptor.
Let's talk about the claws and behavior of the Velociraptor. A universally known and defining characteristic is their sharp claw. In films, we often see velociraptors attacking much larger dinosaurs in packs, inflicting deep lacerating wounds upon them. But was this truly the reality? Dromaeosauridae characteristically have 4 toes on their feet. The first is usually rudimentary, the second toe is curved upward and has a famously long, sharp claw, and the animal uses the third and fourth toes for walking or running. As we have mentioned earlier, this claw was about 6 centimeters in size. During experiments, it was found that the claw could pierce the skin covering, but not cut through flesh. Studies of its leg bones also showed that the Velociraptor was quite fast, and the mobility of its toes resembled the talons of modern eagles and owls.
So, the Velociraptor was a swift, active predator that would pursue its prey, using its claws to hold the victim firmly, pressing it down to the ground, much like modern birds of prey do. And its feathered forelimbs could be used to maintain balance.
Did velociraptors hunt in packs? There is no direct evidence. While fossil sites of herbivorous dinosaurs have been found with several Dromaeosauridae, no such remains have been discovered with velociraptors.
The remains of several Deinonychus were discovered alongside a Tenontosaurus. Given that the animals were preserved together, something must have happened that caused them to die in the same place at the same time. Perhaps the Tenontosaurus got stuck in a bog, and the Deinonychus wanted to feast on it, and the clumsiest among them also fell into the trap.
However, we cannot know for certain whether it was a pack or just different Deinonychuses that happened to gather to feast on easy prey. It might have been something similar to the way modern vultures and scavengers group together to eat a carcass. Velociraptors are close relatives of birds, but it's hard to recall modern predatory birds that hunt in a coordinated pack, like lions, wolves, or African wild dogs. Most often, they are solitary predators. Also, birds of prey hunt in pairs, a male and a female. Sometimes there are cases when, for example, several falcons attack a flock of birds, but not as a coordinated group, but each for themselves. So the overall picture that emerges is that most likely, velociraptors were solitary predators or hunted in pairs, male and female.
Given the absence of direct evidence for pack behavior and taking into account the velociraptor's modest dimensions, it appears highly improbable that it would have been able to attack big dinosaurs. More than likely, it primarily hunted much smaller prey. Remains of a Protoceratops were also discovered, with velociraptor teeth fragments found on its jaw. Research into this find led scientists to conclude that the Protoceratops had been long dead when the velociraptor found it, suggesting carrion could also have been part of its diet.
But that's not all. In 1971, the remains of a Protoceratops and Velociraptor that died fighting each other were found. Most likely, a sudden collapse of a sand dune buried two dinosaurs during a fight. The Velociraptor was underneath the Protoceratops, its right foreleg clamped in the Protoceratops' beak, and its hind claw in the Protoceratops' neck. This suggests Velociraptors might have used their claws for stabbing wounds to the victim's neck, and that adult Protoceratops could have been part of their diet. Protoceratops weighed around 8 to 1000 kilograms, which is about 4 to 5 times the size of a Velociraptor. It is possible that it primarily attacked old and sick animals, hunting young ones. There is a thought that in this case, the Velociraptor wanted to catch a young Protoceratops, but an adult stood up to defend it, and it was in the midst of their battle that a sand dune buried them.
So, to summarize, the Velociraptor was a swift, active predator that hunted either alone or in pairs, a male and a female. Its diet consisted of smaller creatures, Protoceratops, young and possibly even adults, primarily those that were weakened or old. It could also feed on carrion. And now it's the Utahraptor's turn. Skeletal studies showed it had very strong hind limbs, but it wasn't as fast as the Velociraptor. This suggests that the Utahraptor might have hunted from ambush. Its signature claw was about 24 centimeters long. As for pack hunting, again, there's no direct evidence that Utahraptors hunted in a coordinated pack.
There is a discovery of a common burial of several Utahraptors of different ages, and probably some iguanodon that was prey. This suggests that Utahraptors took care of their offspring. Perhaps the adult pair hunted the prey, and then the children came to the feast. Probably the prey was driven into a swamp, where along with it perished the careless family of Utahraptors.
So there is no direct evidence of pack hunting for Utahraptor. It remains only to assume that, by analogy with predatory birds, Utahraptors hunted individually, perhaps in male and female pairs. They also likely incubated and cared for their offspring. It's probable that the same applied to Velociraptors, but once again there is no direct evidence.
About the hunting habits of the Utahraptor. It was quite a large and strong predator, weighing as much as a modern bear, so it could hunt big prey. There have been no discoveries of Utahraptor with the remains of other dinosaurs inside, so we can only speculate who might have been the potential prey of the Utahraptor. At the same time, in the Utahraptor's habitat, iguanodonts like Iguanocolossus and Hippodraco were found. Primarily, these could have been their young, old, or sick individuals. Also find the young of sauropods, Sinornithosaurus and Alioramus. Adult sauropods of that period, although smaller in size than the well-known giants Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus, still probably had no natural enemies, possibly young Gastonia, as adult individuals were very well protected and would have been difficult and dangerous prey for a Utahraptor. Also, Camptosaurus, Falcarius, and other comparatively smaller dinosaurs could have become prey.
Utah's nature preserve is waiting for you to explore. Horseback rides through its incredible landscapes offer the perfect way to truly experience nature and escape from the everyday routine. So as we see, the Velociraptor was an active and fast predator but quite small in size. Most likely it hunted alone, so it mainly terrorized small inhabitants of its habitat.
But Utahraptor, with its impressive size, posed a threat even to quite large dinosaurs. However, it most likely hunted alone, or in a pair, a male and a female.
That's all for today. Thank you for watching this video all the way to the end. If you liked it, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Imagine you are walking through a Cretaceous forest at night and suddenly realize that someone is watching you. It's Freddy Krueger among the dinosaurs, coming to you in a nightmare. Hello, my name is Serhi.
And I'm Emma, and today we'll talk about the Therizinosaurus.
It's about the largest in its family and the most mysterious dinosaur overall. It's Therizinosaurus kiloniformis.
It became renowned for its formidable front claws, measuring up to 1 full meter in length. These are the longest claws among all modern and extinct animals, but their exact purpose is still under question.
Let's start from the very beginning. The first specimens were found in Mongolia in 1948. The find was named Therizinosaurus, which means scythe lizard, and the species named kiloniformis, which means turtle-like, because it was mistakenly believed that the claws belonged to a turtle-like reptile.
Many years would pass, and several more skeletal fragments would be found, before in 1970 the hypothesis was put forward that the Therizinosaurus was not a turtle, but a predatory theropod. But even this isn't entirely accurate.
No complete skeleton of Therizinosaurus kiloniformis has been found to this day. Henceforth, we'll just say Therizinosaurus, meaning this specific species.
All that has been found are only forelimbs, shoulder blades, fragments of hind limbs, and ribs, though their status is still under question. All of this is indicated on the image.
And then a logical question arises about reconstructing the general appearance of these animals. So is all of this completely made up?
Partially, that's true. Of course, we cannot 100% assert that this is exactly how the Therizinosaurus looked, that it was covered with exactly such feathers, exactly such a color, and so on. However, there is something that helps us learn more about this animal, having only a few bones.
And these are relatives of the Therizinosaurus. Over many years, more and more new dinosaurs were discovered that were related to the Therizinosaurus. A lot of time passed before paleontologists untangled this taxonomic tangle and assigned them to the family Therizinosauridae.
Finally, a definitive answer was given to the question of whether the Therizinosaurus was a sauropod. The diagram shows that none of the dinosaurs presented had a complete skeleton found, yet their relatedness suggests they also had a similar appearance.
So what do we have? The Therizinosaurus lived in what is now Mongolia, approximately 70 million years ago. By comparing the bone sizes of other Therizinosaurideas, we estimate the Therizinosaurus's length to be around 9 to 10 meters, meaning its height was approximately 6 to 7 meters. It had a large barrel-shaped body, a relatively short tail, and a long neck with a small head. Its weight is estimated differently, but we will focus on 3 to 5 EDOTs.
Since the skull of the Therizinosaurus itself has not been discovered, scientists rely on the remains of related dinosaurs, specifically Erlikosaurus. Its head is relatively small with a horny beak, and its small teeth are designed for consuming plant matter.
It was a real discovery, since it was thought before that Therizinosaurus was a predator, like all theropods it belonged to.
Besides its teeth, a plant-based diet is further suggested by its large barrel-shaped body, which had to accommodate a great deal of low-calorie food. Perhaps the Therizinosaurus also occasionally fed on small, slow-moving animals, but plants were still the main basis of its diet.
It's interesting that the remains of an ancient relative named Falcarius were found. This Therizinosauridae lived between 125 and 130 million years ago in what is now the USA. The structure of its teeth suggests that this species was omnivorous, making Falcarius a representative of a transitional type from carnivorous theropods to the herbivorous ones that Therizinosaurids eventually became.
Falcarius could potentially have been prey for the Utahraptor, which we talked about in the previous video. Be sure to watch it, there's a lot of interesting stuff. Do you want to cook like a real professional chef? Choose Theri-Knife. Sharpness inspired by the Therizinosaurus.
Let's return to our Therizinosaurus. The skeletal structure of other Therizinosaurids indicates that Therizinosaurus walked on its hind legs, much like all theropods.
Feather impressions of Therizinosaurus have also not been found, but Beipiaosaurus, a small Therizinosauridae, definitely had them. It lived about 125 million years ago in the area that is now China. Of course, just like in the case of the Utahraptor from the previous video, we cannot claim with 100% certainty that Therizinosaurus had feathers, but it was still quite likely.
There is also a high likelihood that the Therizinosaurus was warm-blooded. Feathers and warm-bloodedness were discussed in more detail in the previous video about the Velociraptor and the Utahraptor.
They, along with Therizinosaurus, are relatives of birds, had feathers, and were warm-blooded.
And finally, the main feature that distinguishes Therizinosaurus from other dinosaurs is its long claws. It is time to find out why the dinosaur needs them.
Other Therizinosaurideas also possessed long claws, but they simply couldn't compare to Therizinosaurus with its nearly meter-long sides.
When it became clear that Therizinosaurus was a theropod and not a turtle, a completely logical assumption was made that it was a predator, so it could use its claws to hunt prey.
Then, when it became known that Therizinosaurs are herbivorous dinosaurs, the purpose of the claws changed from weapons of attack to weapons of defense.
In movies, games, and even online videos, you can see Therizinosaurus piercing its attackers through.
He looks like some kind of Freddy Krueger or Wolverine from X-Men of the Cretaceous period. However, he couldn't use his scythes like these fictional characters. Let's find out why.
To pierce an object, you need a strong weapon, a powerful and precise strike. The Therizinosaurus was a very large and strong dinosaur, but could it deliver precise and coordinated strikes? Unlikely. The 5-ton dinosaur had a small head, and accordingly a small brain, and it's hard to imagine it as a professional swordmaster or fencer.
And one more thing. Let's look at the boxers. These athletes train to deliver precise, highly coordinated punches with their fists. Yet there is still a risk of injuring them. And the Therizinosaurus would have had to strike with straight fingers, which most likely would lead to fractures. Still, his skeleton wasn't made of adamantium, and claw studies showed they weren't that strong, nor designed for piercing enemies. So the Therizinosaurus wasn't a deadly killer.
However, its claws could still be used for defense, serving as a powerful deterrent. Its body structure indicated that the animal was relatively slow, so escape as a primary defense was not an option. An adult Therizinosaurus was a large creature and evidently had few natural predators. Let's consider its potential attackers.
Adasaurus was a dromaeosaurid about 2.5 to 3.5 meters long and weighing 35 to 85 kilograms. It could only be dangerous to Therizinosaurus young.
Alioramus is a tyrannosaurid about 5 to 6 meters long and approximately 500 to 700 kilograms. Although it was not small, it could not pose a threat to an adult Therizinosaurus, except possibly to the young.
Tarbosaurus batar, a tyrannosaurid about 10 meters long and weighing 4.5 to 5 tons, the only potential enemy of an adult Therizinosaurus.
They were similar in size and weight, but their unique body structure meant they had different heights. Therizinosaurus was about 6 to 7 meters, and Tarbosaurus was about 3 meters at the hips. So the hero of our video had a height advantage.
He could use his claws specifically against the Tarbosaurus. We don't know exactly how this happened. Therizinosaurus might have held them out in front of him, swinging his arms, threatening enemies. He could strike wide, scratching an attacker, like what cats do. Of course, there was a risk of breaking claws, but life is more important. Besides, as studies have shown, broken claws could grow back. Tarbosaurs most likely hunted alone, so a Therizinosaur could probably put up a fight one-on-one.
So, to summarize, Therizinosaurus most likely used its claws for defense, intimidating opponents by waving its long forelimbs, but it did not impale its enemies, as is often depicted in films or online videos. Another hypothesis was that their claws were used for digging. Among modern animals, aardvarks, armadillos, and anteaters come to mind. These creatures possess strong and quite long claws to dig into the earth, destroy termite mounds, and tear apart anthills. There was even a suggestion at one point that Therizinosaurus was also insectivorous.
However, as was stated earlier, his claws were not strong enough and not suitable for digging, and it's hard to imagine how a 5-ton Therizinosaurus could feed itself on insects. The largest modern representatives of the animal world that feed on insects are the aardvark, giant anteater, and giant armadillo, which do not even weigh 100 kilograms. Their extinct relatives, who also fed on insects, were not much larger, while the giant relatives of armadillos, glyptodonts, were herbivorous.
And finally, another important use for their claws was for feeding. The Therizinosaurus, a herbivorous dinosaur that stood taller than modern-day giraffes, occupied a similar ecological niche, feeding on the leaves of trees or tree ferns. Its long fingers with claws allowed it to pull branches towards itself, much like modern sloths do. They also possess long claws which they utilize for defense when attacked by predators. There was even a hypothesis that the Therizinosaurus could climb trees like a sloth. But now it sounds like a joke, a 5-ton animal in a tree. Let's also recall the ancestor of modern sloths, the Megatherium. The animal measured about 6 meters in length, weighing approximately 4 tons. It also fed on leaves from trees, pulling the branches towards itself.
Megatherium could reach branches with its paws that its head could not reach. Therizinosaurus, on the other hand, had a rather long neck. It could reach branches that its paws could not, and it seemed that claws weren't really necessary. Giraffes come to mind again. However, they have long, flexible tongues that help them grasp and pluck leaves. Therizinosaurus did not have this ability, so its front paws that hold the branch with leaves would be useful.
So, we've established that the dinosaur utilized its enormous claws for feeding and also for protection against its enemies. However, this still doesn't fully explain why they are so excessively large. The animal could have easily managed with much smaller claws, just like those found on other Therizinosaurideas. Therefore, this particular aspect still remains a complete mystery.
There is another assumption that the Therizinosaurus could use its claws in courtship displays, attracting the attention of females. And of course, they could be used in fights with other males. Light a fire. Gather your friends and savor a taste that remembers millions of years. Cretaceous forest marshmallows with ginkgo and araucaria flavor.
Regarding their offspring, it's purely speculative. Paleontologists have not discovered any nests, eggs, or baby skeletons that could be identified as Therizinosaurus. Therefore, all of this is just assumption.
They might have laid eggs in primitive nests, dug into the ground, and guarded them. It is unlikely that a 5-ton animal would sit on them. Maybe they covered them with vegetation to keep them warm, and then cared for their offspring in the same way modern birds do. However, let us repeat, these are all just assumptions. It is also unknown whether they lived alone or in groups.
Well, unfortunately, that's all. If you know any other interesting facts about the Therizinosaurus that we didn't mention, write them in the comments. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe. Hello, my name is Serhi.
I'm Emma, and today we're going to show you Dromaeosaurids.
This family includes the Velociraptor and Utahraptor we know from the last video.
The very name Dromaeosaur means running lizard. The Dromaeosaurid family comprises around 30 genera of predatory dinosaurs, with new ones being discovered annually. We will, however, only showcase the most extensively studied dinosaurs from this family.
A distinctive feature of Dromaeosaurids is a sharp sickle-shaped claw on the foot, like a Velociraptor's.
Dromaeosaurids were warm-blooded animals, close relatives of birds. Most of them, and possibly all, were covered in feathers.
For more details about feathers and being warm-blooded, watch the previous video about the Velociraptor.
There will also be an explanation why certain dinosaurs are shown feathered, even though feathers were not found.
All right, let's begin. Utahraptor, a thief or a robber from Utah with a length of 6 to 7 meters and a weight of 4 to 500 kilograms. You can find out more about it in our previous video.
Sinornithosaurus. In translation, it means Chinese bird lizard. Its length is about 120 centimeters, and its weight is 3 to 5 kilograms. Studies of melanosomes from feather imprints have allowed us to partially reconstruct its color.
Microraptor, translated as small thief or robber. Length about 80 centimeters, wingspan about 90 centimeters, weight estimated from half a kilogram to 1.5 kilograms. Melanosome research allowed the reconstruction of Microraptor's plumage color. It most likely glided down from the trees, but it could not fly properly like modern birds can. Scientists are still debating exactly how the Microraptor managed to do it. In its stomach, bones of ancient mammals, reptiles, birds, and even fish scales were discovered.
Changyuraptor, approximately 120 centimeters long, weighing about 4 kilograms. Changyu means long feather, and raptor means robber or thief. This refers to the long tail feathers, about 30 centimeters. It's believed these feathers allowed it to better control its gliding and landing.
Zhenyuanlong, the dragon of Zhenyuan. It was about 1.6 to 2 meters long and weighed around 20 kilograms. It was a fairly heavy, sturdy dinosaur with short forelimbs, yet it had long feathers on them. Although remains with feather impressions were found, its exact color could not be determined.
Wulong, the dancing dragon. The specimen was crow-sized, but the skeleton was a year-old dinosaur, so it was still growing. Unlike modern birds, this young one already had adult plumage. Its exact color is unknown.
Daurlong, the Dorian dragon, about 1 to 1.5 meters long, was slimmer and lighter than a Velociraptor. A nearly complete skeleton with soft tissue impressions was found.
Deinonychus, the terrible claw. Its length was around 3 to 3.5 meters, 90 centimeters at the hips, weighing about 60 to 70 kilograms, possibly more. The claw was 12 to 13 centimeters long. No feathers were found, but it was most likely feathered. The findings of the skeletons of the group of Deinonychus and Tenontosaurus lead some scientists to think about pack hunting. We talked more about this and about feathers in the previous video about Velociraptor.
Buitreraptor, a thief from Buitre, the place where it was found in Argentina. The Spanish word buitre means vulture. Length approximately 1.5 meters, weight about 3 kilograms. No feathered fossils were found, however. It was most likely feathered. Achillobator, Achilles' hero. Another rather large dromaeosaurid, though smaller than Utahraptor. Its length 4.5 to 5 meters, its weight 250 to 350 kilograms. Feathers have not been discovered, however, it's highly probable that it possessed them. Studies of its hind limbs indicated it was not swift, so similar to the Utahraptor, it's presumed to have hunted from ambush.
Linheraptor, a thief from Linhe, the site where its bones were discovered. Around 180 centimeters long, weighing about 25 kilograms. A quick, agile predator, it likely preyed on smaller ceratopsians. No feathers found.
Saurornitholestes, a lizard bird robber. Its length was 180 centimeters, its weight estimated at 5 to 10 kilograms. It resembled a Velociraptor but had longer legs and a lighter build, strong jaws, and was adapted to fight its prey. No feathers were found. Saurornitholestes' teeth have been found in Quetzalcoatlus bones. Considering their size, Saurornitholestes most likely fed on carrion.
Dromaeosaurus, the running lizard. About 2 meters long and 16 kilograms in weight. It had powerful jaws. Its bite was several times stronger than that of a Velociraptor. Tooth wear suggests that it was a strong and active predator that relied more on its jaws than its claws when hunting. In this, it is similar to Saurornitholestes. No feathers have been found.
Austroraptor, the southern thief, is another large dromaeosaurid. It is 5 to 6 meters long and weighs 300 to 500 kilograms. It had a long, narrow snout and conical teeth. This suggests it may have fed on fish, which is atypical for dromaeosaurids. Of course, it could also have hunted other animals. No feathers have been found.
Velociraptor, a quick thief or robber, a small dromaeosaurid about 1.5 to 2 meters long and weighing 15 to 20 kilograms. Characterized by a claw approximately 6 centimeters long. It was an active predator and hunted small animals, and could also attack young Protoceratops, as well as old or sick individuals. More details in the previous video. Do you want your pet to always be healthy, active, and happy? Choose Raptorbite pet food, a fully balanced and nutritious meal for daily energy and overall well-being. Raptorbite, more protein, more strength, more instinct.
Adasaurus, the evil lizard. Its length ranges from 2.5 to 3.5 meters, with an estimated weight of 36 to 87 kilograms. It was mentioned in our previous video about Therizinosaurus. No feathers were found.
Rahonavis in Malagasy translates to cloudbird. It is a small predator about 70 centimeters long and weighing 1 to 2 kilograms. Whether it belonged to Dromaeosaurids or to birds is still a debated question. However, it had the signature raptor claw, so we decided to mention it here. No feathers were discovered, however. On the bones there are quill knobs, to which the flight feathers are attached in contemporary birds.
And that is all. Thank you for watching until the very end.
And if you liked the video, then give it a like, subscribe, and write in the comments what interesting things you know about the Dromaeosaurids mentioned today. See you!